What's happening, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of Swag Talk on YouTube. This is your boy Charles Wells, aka C Wells, coming at you, and we're gonna have another spring 2021 season recap on our hands. We're gonna talk about the Hornets of Alabama State as we move through this and finally put the spring season completely behind us. We're less than 100 days till the start of the fall season, so we'll be getting ready to do our 12-team conference recaps in a few weeks. So we're gonna wrap up the spring officially, put a bow on that, and get rid of it, and then get ready for the fall, which I think shapes up to be probably the best, or one of the best, if not the most important fall season in SWAC football in God 20 plus years. So we're gonna talk about how the Hornet season went. Before we do that, socials as usual are down in the description below. The podcast is SWACtalk is on anchor.fm/SWACtalk. It can be found on Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Those are the streaming platforms that you can listen to the show on. You can check out all the past episodes in the archives. We do have an edition of SWACtalk being uploaded today. It's going to be a more in-depth recap of the Alabama State spring season. Are going to go into the numbers pretty deep and talk about how they turned out and how what to expect a little bit for them in the fall. But we're going to save the bulk of that for the fall preview. As usual, go ahead and subscribe. We're at 139 subscribers. Number is still growing pretty fast, so I'd like to thank everybody for that. And we're going to continue to do what we do. So if you haven't subscribed already, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscription button. Go ahead and pop that notification bell, ring it, ding, ding, to be alerted to any content that I upload. Because like I said, we're going to have a spring recap every Sunday. And then when the fall recap start, when the previews start, they're going to be on Wednesdays and Sundays. So you don't want to miss any of that. For the next few weeks until the start of my fall recaps, we will be doing a couple more editions of the Swag Talk Time Machine. We have one coming Wednesday, recapping the 2002 SWAC championship game between Grambling and Alabama A&M. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about these Hornets, man. They are a team who pretty much is a definition of a team that's always going to be around that 500 mark. They may finish above barely, they may finish below barely. They're never really going to be super duper bad, but they're also not going to be really good. That's a mark that they have to shake. They haven't been a consistent team since about 2014, 2015. So they need to find a way to get off of that, that hump of not being able to be more than mediocre. They are a dangerous team, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they trash or nothing like that, but they're the kind of team that can mess up your Saturday, but they're also the kind of team that can fight hard for a couple quarters and then lose. So they kind of play up and down to the competition, and that does bite them from time to time. They opened up their season with a 24-21 loss to Southern in a game where they looked the part of a team who hadn't played football in over a year with a new quarterback. Ryan Nettles is a name that I expect to hear from now on until he finishes his career at Alabama State, barring any kind of injury. I think he's going to set himself up to be one of the top quarterbacks at Alabama State when he leaves. There's a big hurdle to overcome in Darnell Kennedy to get to that top spot. But, he's a guy who, if he continues to develop and play like he played for the good portions of his season, he's going to be a really good quarterback when he leaves. So he was a guy who didn't really he missed his senior season in high school due to injury. And then obviously with the 2020 season being canceled, he had another year to sit out. And then he started opening night against Southern. And Southern gave them a little bit of a hard time on defense. The line started 2 freshman tackles, and they got abused for the most part. But he grew as the season went on. I think he showed some flashes in that game. He did lead them down the field on a game-winning drive, which didn't come to pass. but he developed as the season grew on, and he became more of a weapon. They had a 2-0 forfeit victory over Alcorn the following week. The next week on the field was March 20th. They played Jackson State at home, defeating them by a score of 35-28 in a game that they led at the half. Jackson made a good run in the second half, but Alabama State was able to withstand that and score on a couple big Ezra Gray touchdowns in the fourth quarter to put the game away. Ezra Gray ran for 195 yards in that game, which was a conference-wide season high rushing yardage. So that was a tremendous game for him, and it put him on the map for people outside of the SWAC. He was a guy who inside the SWAC, you knew his name, but he didn't really put up great numbers. I think he had a good game against Auburn a couple years ago, but for the most part, he was a guy who could get big yardage because he was a fast guy if he gets on the edge, but he just didn't have the consistency to really be a top back. He's put himself in that conversation right now, so that's a guy to keep an eye out on. The next game was March 27th at Pine Bluff. That game played about a quarter and a half before the weather caused that game to be ruled a no contest. They stepped back on the field on April 3rd against South Carolina State, and they laid an absolute dud. There's no other way to put it. South Carolina State led this game 7-0 for a long portion of the game. Alabama State tied it up at 7, and then South Carolina State scored the winning touchdown in the fourth quarter. Not a good game offensively for them at all. Nobody did anything offensively. Ezra Gray couldn't get going. Ryan Nettles couldn't get going. Defensively, they played well. Obviously, holding the opponent to 14 points, you should win games like that, but they did not do that. So that game set them back. The next week, they beat Valley 42-17 in a game that Valley was in for a long time until they decided to go for it on fourth. I forgot what the down and distance was, but it was fourth down, and they were inside their own territory. They chose to go for it. I think it was like 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, and they chose to go for it inside their own territory. Obviously, didn't get it, and Alabama State was able to score, and then they tacked on a couple other touchdowns to pull that game out and win it rather comfortably. But that was a game that was kind of dicey for a half, and they found their footing to pick up their second win on the field, their third win on the season. They closed out their season in Birmingham against Alabama A&M in the Magic City Classic. Again, pretty good first half. They ran the ball fairly well early. Ryan Nettles got injured in that game. He did not return. Chris Scott came in at quarterback, and the offense just could not get going. Alabama A&M was able to find their footing as an offense in the second half, and they made enough big plays to win that game 38-17. Giving Alabama State a final record of 3-3 and 3-2 on conference in conference games. Obviously, on field they were 2-3 and 2-2 in conference, but that forfeit counts. So I just like to differentiate between on paper and on field. But that's it's a dub is a dub, no matter how you get it. So that they finished their season at 500 at 3-3. The Hornets, statistically, they were a middle of the pack team in offense. They were like 7th in the league in rushing at 155 yards per game. They were middle of I think 7th again in passing with 202 yards per game. They were 6th in the league in rushing defense at 143 yards per game. They led the league in passing defense, allowing 184 yards per game passing. They had 17 total touchdowns as a team. They averaged 23 points per game. They allowed 24. So as you can see, numbers were very similar. They had a 33% completion rate on third downs, 31 as a defense. They did not make a field goal this year, and that's something that really hurt them, especially against Southern. They missed a game-tying touchdown. I think they missed game-tying field goal. I think they missed another field goal in that game. You just cannot not make field goals. I'm not a big proponent of kicking field goals, especially red zone, but anytime you attempt field goals, you cannot miss them all. You have to make some to give yourself some when you need to count on that, and just that really was an Achilles heel for them and really set them back big time on the season. That They were led in rushing by Ezra Gray. He averaged 80. Excuse me. He averaged about 87 yards per game rushing. He did have 3 touchdowns on the season. Ryan Nettles threw for 9 touchdowns on the season, 5 interceptions. He was Hornet quarterbacks were sacked 11 times. Jahal Booker was the leading receiver. He got 18 passes on the year. Michael Jefferson caught 24. He had 234 yards receiving. Booker had 252 yards receiving, averaging about 50 yards per game. Michael Jefferson didn't have the kind of season that you kind of expected him to have. He did have some costly drops in a couple games, and he chose to hit the transfer portal after the season, and now he's going to UL Lafayette. So they have a hole to fill with their big play receiver, but I thought Booker and Jeremiah Hickson both did good jobs stepping up as other receivers. So now somebody will have to take the reins as the number one guy. Defensively, Alabama State was very solid, especially against the pass. They did a good job of getting pressure on quarterbacks. They had 11 sacks on the season, 5 interceptions. Ershaw Davis was the man on that defense. He had 41 total tackles, which was 20 more than the second place guy. That defensive line was very solid. Christian Clark anchored that line. He was the guy that could not really be moved. Colton Adams was a linebacker who was all over the place. Kind of like a SWAC version of Luke Kuechly, only without the super high amount of tackles. And I'm not just saying that because he's white, but I thought he played a pretty solid season, and he's been a solid linebacker for them. And that defensive line is stout. You're not going to get a lot rushing against them, but they do a good job of getting stops when they need to, and they did a great job on third downs to keep them in games. Obviously, offensively, they could not get over the hump in a lot of games. So Alabama State definitely has a tough road ahead of them. Their season in the fall is going to be very tough. They open up with Miles College and Auburn, and then they their SWAC start is Bethune-Cookman, FAMU, Pine Bluff, Jackson, Alabama A&M, and Prairie View before they close out with LA and Texas Southern in the SWAC, and another tough game in the Turkey Day Classic against Tuskegee. So not an easy schedule for them. If they're gonna challenge for the East, they have to find some consistency on all forms. The special teams has to be better. They didn't really do a great job on returns either. So they just have a lot to improve on. And I think, going into the fall, I don't like to really put coaches on hot seats, but you have to figure that Coach Hill-Ely is gonna have to really take that next step with this team. And this is a division that's not for the faint of heart. So if they don't start off well in this division, then I think his days may be numbered at Alabama State. So it's going to be interesting, especially when your state rival is the defending champs. The pressure it ramps up even more for you. So they have to continue to fight that battle. And now they're in an East Division that's even harder than it was before. So they have a tremendous road ahead of them. Spring obviously was not the best, but it was a success to a degree. And, they were able to identify some young pieces and establish some guys who had been up already. So we'll see how the Hornets turn out in the fall. The spring, like I said, they finished 3-2 in conference, 3-3 overall. And that's going to do it for us today. Like I said, we have a podcast episode uploading today as well, going more in depth on the Hornets spring season. And we'll be back on next Sunday as we review that very interesting and tumultuous Grambling spring season. That should be a very interesting episode. Wednesday, SWACtalk Time Machine 2002 SWAC Championship, Grambling against Alabama A&M. And that's going to do it for me. I hope everybody has a good Sunday. Enjoy your Memorial Day. Be safe. And I'll see you guys on YouTube again on Wednesday. So we're out of here.